Hi, it's Lolli again, back at book club, and we are reading Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and we're on chapter 6. Now, if you notice, what we might try to do is you notice none of these chapters are named. So, while we read today, think about a good name for this chapter. Remember, a name for a chapter should have something to do with the main idea or the main character. Okay, let's start. Chapter 6. The next day after school, Mr. Bennet called me up to his desk. Margaret, he said, I'd like to discuss your getting to know you paper. For instance, why do you hate religious holidays? What was I sorry I wrote that? How positively stupid of me. If it was true that he was trying to find out if we were normal, I guess he thought I wasn't. I half laughed. Oh, I just wrote that, I said. I really don't hate them at all. You must have had a reason. You could tell me. It's confidential. I raised my eyebrow at Mr. Bennet. I can do that really good, raise one without the other. I do it whenever I can't think of anything to say. People notice it right away. Some people actually ask me, how did I do that? They forget, and then they forget what we were talking about and concentrate on my right eyebrow. I don't know exactly how I do it. What I do is think about it, and the eyebrow goes up. I can't do it with my left, only my right. But Mr. Bennet noticed, but he didn't ask me anything about it, how I do it. He just said, I'm sure you have a perfectly good reason for hating religious holidays. I knew he was waiting for me to say something. He wasn't going to just forget about it, so I decided to get it over with in a hurry. None of these holidays are special to me. I don't belong to any religion, I said. Mr. Bennet seemed pleased, like he had uncovered some deep, dark mystery. I see. And your parents? They aren't any religion? I'm supposed to choose my own when I grow up. If I want to, that is. Mr. Bennet folded his hands and looked at me for a while. Then he said, Okay, Margaret, you can go now. I hope he decided I was normal after all. I lived in New York for 11 and a half years. I don't think anybody ever asked me about my religion. I never even thought about it. Now, all of a sudden, it was the big thing in my life. That night when Grandma called, she told me she had gotten a subscription to Lincoln Center for the two of us. We'd meet one Saturday a month, have lunch, and then go to a concert. Grandma really is clever. She knew my parents would never say no to one Saturday a month at the Lincoln Center. That was culture, and they thought culture was very important. And now Grandma and I would have a chance to spend some time alone. But I was glad that the Lincoln Center didn't start right away because I didn't want anything to interfere with Brawl Day. First thing, on Saturday morning, Moose Freed arrived to cut our lawn. My father sulked behind a sports magazine. His finger was a lot better, but it was still bandaged. I sat around outside while Moose cut the grass. I liked the way he sang as he worked. I also liked his teeth. I saw them when he smiled at me. They were very clean and white, and one in the front was a little crooked. I pretended to be really busy reading a book, but the truth is I was watching Moose. If he looked toward me, I put my nose back in the book in a hurry. Moose would be number one in my book. If only I was brave enough. But what would Nancy think? She hated him. After lunch, my mother told my father we were going shopping. We still had our same car, but my mother thought we needed two now because there weren't any buses in Fairbrook and taxis are so expensive. My father said he'd see, but I knew we'd be getting another one soon. My mother can talk my father into anything. My mother drove to a shopping center where there was a Lord and Taylor. I had on my special blue plaid dress and my loafers without socks and 3 Band-Aids on my blisters. First, we went to the ladies' lingerie department where my mother told the sales lady she wanted to see a bra for me. The sales lady took one look and told my mother we'd better be off in the teen we'd be better off in the teen department where they had bras in very small sizes. My mother thanked the lady and I almost died. We went down on the escalator and headed for the teen shop. They had a whole bunch of underwear there, bras and panties and slips to match. All I ever wore was white underpants and regular undershirts, sometimes a slip if I was going to a party. My mother went to the counter and I told the sales lady we were interested in a bra. I stood back and pretended not to know a thing. I even bent down to scratch a new mosquito bite. "Come here, dear," the sales lady called. I hate people who call you dear. I walked over to the counter and raised my right eyebrow at her. She reached over the counter and said, "Let's measure you, dear." She put the tape measure all around me and smiled at my mother. 28, she said. I felt like giving her a pinch. Then she took out a bunch of bras and put them on the counter in front of us. My mother felt them all. "Now, dear, I suggest the Grow bra. It grows with you. You're not quite ready for a double A. Suppose you try them on and see which one is most comfortable." She led us to a dressing room with a pink door that locked. My mother sat in the dressing room on a chair. I took off my dress. I wasn't wearing anything underneath but pants. I picked up the first bra and stuck my arms into the straps. I couldn't fasten it in the back. My mother had to help me. She adjusted the straps and felt the front of me. "How does it feel?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Well, is it too tight?" "No." "Too loose?" "No." "Do you like it?" "I guess." "Try on this one." She got me out the first bra and into the next one. I wondered how I'd ever learn to do it myself. Maybe my mother would have to dress me every day. The next bra was softer than the first. My mother explained it was made of Dacron. I liked the way it felt. My mother nodded. The third one was fancy. It was lace and it made me itch. My mother said it was impractical. The sales lady knocked on the door as I was getting back into my dress. "Well, how did it go?" "Did we find something?" My mother told her we did. "Well, we'll take 3 of these," she said, holding up the soft bra. When we got back to the counter, who should be there but Janie Loomis and her mother. "Oh, hi, Margaret," she said. "I'm getting some winter pajamas." Her cheeks were bright red, and she saw the selection of the bras on the counter in front of her. "Me too," I said. "I'm getting some flannel pajamas for winter." "Well, see you Monday," Janie said. "Right, Monday." I was plenty glad that my mother was down at the other end of the counter paying for my bras. Okay, let's go back to think of a title. What do you think a good title for this chapter would be? Remember, titles should be short and to the point. Think what you think the title should be. I think it should be called Bras, or maybe My New Bra. How about you? Let's go ahead and read the next chapter. As we read this next chapter 7, be thinking again, what would be a good name for this chapter? Remember, the chapter title is kind of like the main idea topic. It has to do with what is the main thing about, what's the most important thing from the chapter, and connects to the main character, Margaret. Okay, chapter 7. When I got home I carried my package straight to my room. I took off my dress and put on the bra. I fastened it first around my waist, then wiggled it up to where it belonged. I threw my shoulders back and stood sideways. I didn't look any different. I took out a pair of socks and stuffed one sock into each side of the bra to see if it really grew with me. It was so too tight that way, but I liked the way it looked, like Laura Danker. I took the socks out and put them away. My father congratulated me at dinner. Well, you're really growing up, Margaret. No more little girl. Oh, Daddy, was all I could think of to say. On Monday, I studied the boys in my class. I had to have some names for my boy book before 3 o'clock. I picked Philip Leroy because he was best looking one. Also Jay Hassler because he had nice brown eyes and clean fingernails. I've decided to leave it at that and explain I didn't know anybody else. Right before the bell rang, Mr. Bennett told us that he was going to ask each of us to do a year-long individual project. Everybody groaned. Mr. Bennett held up his hands. Now, it's not as bad as it sounds, class. For one thing, it's personal between each of you and me. I'm not asking you what your topic is. I expect you to choose it yourself and work it up in your own way. The only thing I insist is that it be something meaningful. More groans. Mr. Bennett looked crushed. I had hoped you would find this interesting. Poor Mr. Bennett. He was really disappointed. The way he talked to us, I got the feeling we made him nervous. Nobody seemed scared of him at all, and you should always be a little scared of your teacher. Sometimes he just sat at his desk and looked out at us like he couldn't believe we were really there. Of course, Nancy pointed out that he never, ever called on Laura Danker. I had noticed as we were getting in line to go home, he reminded us that on Thursday we'd have a test on the first 2 chapters in our social studies book. He asked us to please be prepared. Most teachers never say please. After school, we went straight to Nancy's. Before we started our official meeting, we talked about Mr. Bennett and his project. We all agreed it was crazy, and none of us could think of a single idea. Then Nancy called the roll. Veronica? I'm here, Gretchen said. Kimberly? I'm here, Janie said. Mavis? I'm here, I said. And so am I. Alexandria. Nancy closed the roll book. Well, let's get to it. We all feel each other's backs to make sure we're wearing our bras. We all were. What size did you get, Janie? Gretchen asked. I got a grow bra, Janie said. Me too. I said, me too, Gretchen laughed. Not me, Nancy said proudly. Mine's a 32 double A. We were all impressed. If you ever want to get out of those baby bras, you have to exercise, she told us. What kind of exercise, Gretchen asked. Like this, Nancy said. She made fists, bent her arms at the elbow, moved them back and forth, sticking out her chest the way out. She said, I must increase my bust. She said it over and over. We copied her movements and chanted with her, we must increase our bust. Good, Nancy told us. Do it 35 times a day, and I promise you'll see the results. Now, for our boy books, Gretchen said. Is everybody ready? We put our boy books on the floor, and Nancy picked them up one at a time. She read each one and passed it around for the rest of us to see. Janie's was first. She had 7 names listed. Number 1 was Philip Leroy. Gretchen had 4 names. Number 1 was Philip Leroy. Nancy listed 18 boys. I didn't even know 18 boys. And number 1 was Philip Leroy. When Nancy got to my boy book, she choked on an ice cube from her glass of cola. When she stopped choking, she read number 1, Philip Leroy. Everybody giggled. Number 2, Jay Hassler. How come you picked him? I was getting mad. I mean, she didn't ask the others why they liked this one or that one, so why should I have to tell? I raised my eyebrows at Nancy. Then she looked away. She got the message. When we were through, Nancy opened her bedroom door. There were Evan and Moose eavesdropping. They followed us down the stairs and outside. When Nancy asked, "Get lost, we're busy," Evan and Moose bursted out laughing. They shouted, "We must, we must, we must increase our bus." Then they fell on the grass and rolled over and over, laughing so hard I hope they both wet their pants. On Tuesday, during the arithmetic review, remember arithmetic's another name for math, I heard a bird go beep. Lots of other kids heard it too, and so did Mr. Bennett. I know because he looked up. I went back to my problems, but pretty soon I heard it again. Beep. After the second peep, Mr. Bennett walked to the window and opened it wide. He stuck his head way out, looking all around. While he was doing that, 3 more peeps came from the room. Mr. Bennett walked to his desk and stood with his hands behind his back. Beep! I looked at Nancy. I was sure it came from her, but she didn't look at me or say anything. Mr. Bennett sat down and tapped his fingers on the top of his desk. Pretty soon our room sounded like a pet store full of birds. Every second there was another peep. It was hard not to giggle. When Nancy kicked me under the table, I knew it was my turn. I looked down and erased my answer to a problem. While I was blowing the eraser dust away, I said it. Peep! By the time Mr. Bennett looked my way, another peep came from across the room. I think it was Philip Leroy. He kept waiting for Mr. Bennett to say something, but he didn't. When he came in the next morning, our desks had been rearranged. Instead of 4 tables, our desks formed one big U shape across the room. There were name cards taped onto each desk. On one side, I was next to Freddie Barnett, who I didn't like at all. I knew for a fact that he was a troublemaker because I saw him stand behind Jay Hassler on the first day of school, and just as Jay was about to sit down, Freddie Barnett pulled his chair away. Jay wound up on the floor. I hate kids who do that. I have to be very careful not to fall in a trap of the lobster. That's what we call him because on the first day of school, he was sunburned bright red. But on the other side of me, things were worse. I was next to Laura Danker. I was afraid to even look her way. Nancy warned me that reputations were catching. Well, I didn't have to worry because Laura didn't even look my way either. She looked straight ahead. Naturally, the 4 PTSs were separated, but Nancy, that lucky, got to sit next to Philip Leroy. There wasn't any more peeping. Mr. Bennett reminded us of our social studies test the next day. That afternoon, we had gym. The girls were left with the gym teacher, Miss Abbott, who told us to line in order of size. I was third from the front end. Janie was first. Laura Danker was last. Gretchen and Nancy were in the middle. After we lined up, Miss Abbott talked about about posture and how important it is to stand up straight. No matter how tall you are, you must never slouch, because height is such a blessing. With that, Miss Abbott, stood up and took some deep breaths. She must have been at least 6 feet tall. Janie and I looked at each other and giggled. We were not blessed. Then Miss Abbott told us since we were in 6th grade and very grown up, there were certain subjects we would cover during the school year, certain very private subjects just for girls. That was all she said, but I got the idea. Why do they wait until 6th grade when you already know everything? That night, I really worked hard. I read the first 2 chapters in my social studies book 4 times. Then I sat on my bedroom floor and did my exercise. I must increase my best. I did it 35 times and climbed into bed. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I just did an exercise to help me grow. Have you thought about it, God? About my growing, I mean? I've got a bra now. It would be nice if I had something to put in it. Of course, you don't think I'm ready. I'll understand. I'm having a test at school tomorrow. Please let me get a good grade on it, God. I want you to be proud of me. Thank you. The next morning, Mr. Bennett passed out the test paper himself. The questions were already on the board. He said to begin as soon as we got our paper. Freddie the lobster poked me and whispered, "No name." "What do you mean, no name?" I whispered back. Freddie whispered, "Nobody signs his name." Bennett won't know whose paper it is. Get it? I got it all right, but I didn't like it, especially since I read the chapters 4 times. But if nobody was going to put a name on the test paper, I wasn't going to either. I felt cheated because Mr. Bennett would never know how hard I studied. I answered all the questions in 15 minutes. Mr. Bennett asked Janie to collect all the papers for him. I couldn't imagine what he would do to us when he found out that nobody had put a name on the test. I figured he'd be plenty mad, but you can't do much to a whole class except keep them after school. We couldn't all be expelled, could we? What do you think a good chapter for this one would be? Chapter 7. What do you think the most important thing that happened to Margaret was? Would it be the secret club? Would it be the big test? Something to think about. Think about a good title, and I'll get back next to you when we start Chapter 8. Have a good day.